If someone had told me that moving to an upscale neighborhood would turn me into John Wick, Dad Edition, I would have laughed in their face. But that was before a fake HOA crew decided to kidnap my daughter. Their biggest mistake? They didn't mess with just any dad. They messed with a Marine-trained hunter who spent 8 years tracking targets in the harshest conditions imaginable. My name is Jake Sullivan, and this is the story of how I went from suburban dad to vigilante justice in exactly 37 hours. It all started when Emma and I pulled up to our new home in Willow Creek Estates. The place looked like something out of a magazine, perfectly manicured lawns, houses that screamed old money, even though most were built in the last decade, and neighbors who probably judged you based on your car's wax job. I'd chosen this neighborhood specifically for Emma, after her mom passed away 2 years ago. I figured a quiet, safe community would be good for both of us. Man, was I wrong. The first red flag came during our HOA orientation meeting. Michelle Hartford, the self-appointed HOA president, greeted us with a smile that reminded me of a shark circling wounded prey. She was in her mid-40s, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and had this way of asking questions that felt more like an interrogation than small talk. "So, Mr. Sullivan," she purred, flipping through papers on her clipboard, "I see you're a single father. Must be challenging, managing everything on your own. What exactly do you do for work?" When I mentioned I was a security consultant, leaving out the 8 years of Marine Corps Special Operations training, her eyes lit up like she'd just won the lottery. During that same meeting, she kept steering the conversation toward our financial situation and long-term plans for the property. Something about her questions set off every alarm bell in my head. You don't spend years hunting high-value targets without developing a sixth sense for danger. And Michelle Hartford? She was radiating it like a nuclear reactor. Emma must have sensed it too, because she kept tugging at my sleeve. Her 8-year-old intuition was probably sharper than most adults I knew. After the meeting, as we walked back to our house, Carol Bennett from next door tried to catch my attention. She was a former teacher, probably in her early 50s, with kind eyes that held something else. Fear, maybe. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, glancing around nervously, "welcome to the neighborhood. If you need anything at all," she pressed a casserole dish into my hands and leaned closer. "Just be careful. Things aren't always what they seem here." Before I could ask what she meant, she hurried back inside her house. The first week passed without major incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Little things kept adding up: the unusually high HOA fees, the number of empty houses on our street, the way certain neighbors would quickly look away when I caught them staring. Then Emma found something in our mailbox that changed everything. It was a crumpled piece of paper with 5 words scrolled across it: "Leave while you still can." But what made my blood run cold wasn't the threatening message. It was what someone had drawn in the corner of the paper, a simple bird symbol with 2 letters underneath: WDD. In military speak, that was code for watchdog, my old unit's nickname. Someone knew exactly who I was. And they were watching. That night, after Emma was asleep, I did what I did best. I went hunting. Not for animals, but for information. I started with public records, checking property sales in Willow Creek over the past year. What I found made my skin crawl. 5 houses sold in the last 6 months alone, all at prices way below market value. And all the sellers had something in common. They were either elderly, single parents, or recent widows, people who might be vulnerable to pressure. The next morning, I knocked on Mrs. Thompson's door. She was an elderly widow whose house had a for sale sign that looked fresher than the others. When she opened the door, her hands were shaking. "Mrs. Thompson," I said gently, "I'm Jake Sullivan. I just moved in down the street. I was wondering if you could tell me about the neighborhood." She glanced nervously over my shoulder before ushering me inside. What she told me over the next hour confirmed my worst suspicions. The HOA wasn't just strict, it was predatory. They used bogus fines, manufactured violations, and intimidation tactics to force people to sell their homes cheap. Then they'd flip them to developers or wealthy buyers at massive profits. "They started with small things," Mrs. Thompson whispered, her teacup rattling against its saucer. "My grass was a 1/4 inch too long. My mailbox wasn't the approved shade of white. Then the fines got bigger, thousands of dollars. When I couldn't pay, they offered to buy my house at half its value. Her voice cracked. My husband built this house with his own hands 40 years ago. But what choice do I have? They're bleeding me dry with these fines. Last week, they claimed my garden gnome was aesthetically offensive and fined me $500. I made a mental note of everything she said. My tactical mind was already forming patterns. This wasn't just harassment, it was a coordinated operation. Someone was running this like a military campaign, identifying targets, applying pressure at weak points, and moving in for the kill when resistance broke down. The question was, how deep did this corruption go? And who else was involved? That afternoon, Michelle called an emergency HOA meeting. She stood at the podium in the community center, announcing new regulations that were borderline insane. Grass couldn't exceed 2 inches. No outdoor furniture visible from the street. All curtains had to be white or beige. And the kicker, a new security assessment fee of $500 per month. When I raised my hand to object, she fixed me with that shark smile. Mr. Sullivan, as a new resident, perhaps you should observe how we do things here before offering criticism. The threat in her voice was clear as crystal. Around me, other residents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one else spoke up. Fear had them all by the throat. After the meeting, a man in his 60s approached me in the parking lot. He introduced himself as George Kim, a retired engineer. "Son," he said quietly, "I've been fighting these vultures for 2 years. Lost my wife to cancer, and they started circling like buzzards the day after her funeral. Be careful. They play dirty, and they've got friends in high places." That night, I installed hidden cameras around my property. Old habits die hard. I also started teaching Emma some basic safety protocols, disguising them as games. If someone you don't know tries to get you to come with them, I explained while we played in the yard, what do you do? She grinned and shouted, "Run. Yell. Tell." "Smart kid," I said. She had no idea how soon she'd need to use those skills. I set up a monitoring station in my home office, multiple screens showing different angles of our property. As I worked, I thought about the watchdog symbol on that note. Someone from my past was trying to warn me. But who? And more importantly, why? The last time I'd seen that symbol was in Afghanistan, where our unit specialized in tracking high-value targets through hostile territory. Were we dealing with someone who knew those tactics? Or was this just a coincidence? Either way, I needed to be prepared for anything. 2 days later, my cameras caught something interesting. At 2 a.m., Tony Marino, Michelle's enforcer, a guy who looked like he bench pressed trucks for fun, was creeping around my property. He wasn't just snooping. He was taking photos, specifically photos of Emma's bedroom window. When I zoomed in on the footage, my heart nearly stopped. In his hand was a thick folder labeled Target Assessment. That's when I knew this had escalated beyond simple property fraud. They were gathering intelligence on my daughter. The hunter in me recognized the pattern immediately. They were building a pressure point profile. Find what someone values most, then use it against them. Classic interrogation technique. But they'd made one critical error. They'd revealed their hand too early. Now I knew what they were planning, and I could prepare accordingly. Game on, Michelle. Game on. The next morning, Emma came home from school talking about a new kids' HOA club that Michelle was starting. "All the kids in the neighborhood have to join, Daddy," she said. "She's really nice. She gave us cookies." Red flag. Massive red flag. I knew Michelle was making her move. But I played along, telling Emma she could go to one meeting, supervised, of course. That Saturday, I dropped her off at the community center for the club meeting, then circled back to observe from my car. Through the window, I watched Michelle and 2 other women questioning the kids. But they weren't asking about school or hobbies. They were asking about parents' work schedules, when houses were empty, who had spare keys hidden outside. They were gathering intelligence and using kids to do it. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. *Dad, Mrs. H talking about something called Willow Plan. Said not to tell parents. Scared? I was out of my car in seconds. But as I approached the building, something made me stop. If I burst in now, I'd tip my hand. Michelle didn't know Emma had texted me. So I waited, every muscle tense, ready to act if needed. 15 minutes later, the meeting ended. Emma ran to my car, trying to look normal, but I could see the fear in her eyes. As we drove home, she told me everything. Mrs. Hartford said we're special helpers for a secret project. She wants to know when our parents work late or if they go on trips. She said if we tell, our parents might have to move away forever. My little girl was shaking. That's when I knew this had gone far beyond HOA harassment. This was organized crime. I pulled over and hugged her tight. You did exactly right, sweetheart. You were so brave to tell me. Nobody should ever ask you to keep secrets from Daddy, okay? She nodded, wiping away tears. I didn't like it, Dad. She tried to make it sound fun, like we were spies. But it felt wrong. I stroked her hair, fighting to keep my voice calm. That's because you have good instincts, Em. Always trust that feeling. Now, how about we get some ice cream, and you can tell me everything? Over chocolate sundaes at our favorite diner, Emma started telling me more little pieces of what she'd seen at that kids' club meeting. Her voice was quiet, like she was still trying to make sense of it all. There were files on the table, Dad, she said, stirring her ice cream, with pictures of houses and families. I saw one with our house and your picture. It had red writing on it that said priority target, military background. She looked up at me. Mrs. Hartford got really excited when I noticed. She said, "You used to be a soldier, and that makes our family extra special for their project." I kept my face calm, nodding like I was just listening to a school story, but inside, everything tightened. They knew, not just that I was a veteran, but enough to flag me as a threat or an opportunity. I'd spent years keeping a low profile after the Marines, avoiding attention, staying under the radar. And yet, they dug deep. How much further did their research go? Did they know about my old unit? My contacts? My past operations? And more than anything, were they already watching the people I cared about? That night, Carol Bennett knocked on my door. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, face pale, eyes red and swollen. For the first time, she called me by my first name. "Jake," she said, voice trembling, "I can't take it anymore. They destroyed my husband. He tried to fight them 2 years ago, and they made his life hell until he had a complete breakdown. We lost everything. And now they're coming for you and Emma. You have to leave." I brought her inside, made her tea, and listened. What she told me changed everything. The HOA wasn't just a corrupt neighborhood group. It was a full-blown criminal enterprise. Her husband, a lawyer, had started digging after they fined them $2,000 for having the wrong shade of beige on their shutters. He uncovered connections, city council members, possibly even state representatives. Then the attacks began. Their car was vandalized. Their dog was poisoned. Clients started canceling appointments out of nowhere. Within 6 months, his practice was ruined, and he collapsed under the pressure. She pulled out a worn folder from her bag. "He kept records," she said, hands shaking. "Everything he found before they broke him." Inside were bank statements with suspicious transfers, property records with forged signatures, photos of Michelle meeting with men tied to organized crime. I flipped through the pages, my military training kicking in, spotting patterns, cross-referencing names, mapping connections. This wasn't just fraud. This was racketeering. RICO-level stuff. "Carol," I said, "this is solid evidence. Why didn't you go to the FBI?" She let out a bitter laugh. "We tried. The local field office said it was a civil matter. Later, we found out Michelle's brother-in-law works there. After that, we knew we were on our own." I made copies of everything. If the system was compromised, I'd have to go around it. But first, I needed more, something so undeniable that even the corrupt couldn't ignore it. The next day, I met Officer Rodriguez at a coffee shop 3 towns over. He was young, maybe mid-30s, but his eyes were sharp, tired, but not broken. "I've been getting complaints about Willow Creek for months," he admitted, stirring his coffee. "But nothing concrete. Every time someone files a formal complaint, it disappears from the system. Witnesses recant. One family vanished overnight, left everything behind, even their dog. I shared what I knew, but kept Carol's folder hidden. Trust had to be earned. He leaned in. I can't officially help you, but I've got a contact in the state police, someone I trust. If you get me solid evidence, I'll make sure it gets to the right hands. But, Jake, be careful. These people have reach, and they don't hesitate to hurt anyone who stands in their way. Later that afternoon, Michelle invited Emma to a special leadership workshop for the kids' HOA club. Every instinct screamed no, but I saw an opening. I agreed, but on my terms. I slipped a tiny tracking device into the heel of her shoe, a relic from my old military days. "Remember our games, sweetheart?" I whispered as I dropped her off. "Run, yell, tell. And if things get scary, press your shoe heel 3 times. Daddy will come." She hugged me tight. "I'll be brave. Like you, Daddy." As I watched her walk into the community center hand in hand with Michelle, my gut twisted. Every part of me wanted to pull her back. But I had to trust the plan. Trust the training. Trust my daughter. The hunter was about to become the hunted, just long enough to set the perfect trap. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. Emma's tracker was moving, away from the center. They were taking her somewhere else. I followed at a distance, heart pounding but mind clear. This was what I'd trained for. Hunt. Track. Retrieve. The signal led to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. I parked a block away and approached on foot, every sense on high alert. Through a grimy window, I saw Emma sitting in a chair, scared but unharmed. Michelle stood nearby with Tony Marino and 2 other men I didn't recognize. They were on the phone, clearly negotiating. Then my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk, "Want your daughter back safe? 24 hours to sign your house over. 50% market value. No police. Or things get messy. Asterisk." They'd made their move. Now it was mine. But these amateurs had made a critical mistake. They thought they were dealing with a scared suburban dad who'd panic and comply. They didn't know they'd just activated a Marine-trained hunter who'd tracked targets through deserts, mountains, and war zones. My daughter wasn't a hostage. She was a mission objective. And I never failed a mission. I activated the voice recorder hidden in my boot and called the number. Michelle answered, her voice dripping with false concern. "Mr. Sullivan, so glad you called. As you can see, Emma's safe with us. She's such a sweet girl. It would be terrible if something happened to her." I kept my voice low, shaky, playing the frightened father. "Please don't hurt her. I'll do whatever you want." "Smart man," she purred. "Come to the warehouse. Alone. Bring the deed. No police. No tricks." Or little Emma learns what happens to families who don't follow HOA guidelines. While she talked, I texted Rodriguez our location, typing with tactical hand signals, a skill from old ops when silence was survival. Minutes later, his reply, asterisk backup standing by. Need probable cause, asterisk. Perfect. I just needed them to confess on tape. "Michelle," I said, letting my voice crack, "why are you doing this? We just wanted a nice place to live." She actually laughed. "Oh, Jake, this is bigger than you. Willow Creek is a gold mine. We've cleared $15 million in property flips this year alone. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs or families to make an omelet. Your military pension, that nice insurance payout from your wife's death, you're an attractive target. Plus, that corner lot of yours? Perfect for the mini mall my investors want to build." I gripped the phone tighter, rage burning beneath the surface. She'd just mentioned my wife like it was nothing. "So this is all about money? You're destroying lives for profit." "Welcome to America, soldier boy," she said. "The HOA's just a front. We've got this running in 5 states. Politicians, cops, judges, everyone gets their cut. No one cares about a few displaced homeowners when there's millions to be made." She paused, smirking. "But you're special. Most people roll over when we apply pressure. You made us work for it. I almost respect that. Almost." I kept her talking, drawing out details while my mind mapped the warehouse. 2 exits, 1 loading dock, high windows, old security cameras. How many others have you done this to? I asked, pretending defeat. 43 properties. 5 developments. Willow Creek is our crown jewel. Land values are skyrocketing. In 5 years, this whole area will be a commercial paradise, and we'll be billionaires. She chuckled darkly. That sweet teacher next door, Carol? Her husband tried to expose us. Poor thing had a complete breakdown. Amazing what a few anonymous threats and some creative harassment can do to a person's mental stability. The beauty is, once someone's labeled as mentally unstable, no one believes their conspiracy theories about corrupt HOAs. My blood ran cold. They hadn't just broken people, they'd weaponized their suffering. I'll bring the deed, I said. But I need proof Emma's okay first. Through the window, I watched Michelle hand Emma a phone. Daddy. Her voice was small but steady. I'm okay. These people are mean, but I remembered what you taught me. I'm being brave. Like you said. That's my girl. Daddy's coming.